Hello and welcome back. ALC Coaches Podcast. Jason Neiman from Good Brand Company here with my lovely co-host Tim Gustafson from ALC Coaches. How you doing, Tim?
Lovely. I love that. That's great.
You are a lovely co-host.
Thank you. Yeah, doing great. Good to be back. Good to be here with you. Looking forward to our discussion today.
Great. Well, I don't want to belabor too much. We're going to jump right in here today. And really what we are talking about today is maybe one of the most timely conversations we can have, and it's about scalability and leadership. And in particular, the scalability of leadership, how that actually works in companies. And so I think what we'd like to do today is just maybe jump in and have Tim, you can give us a little background on why this is today's topic and what was the hot button that got pushed for you today to push you into that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jason. So this idea of growing leaders for me goes way back. I think I was sort of put in leadership kind of roles, not really knowing it when I was very young, in sports and that kind of thing. And I really enjoyed it. I've always enjoyed the leadership aspect and helping others to progress and to grow. That's how I always took it. And so anyway, it's always been something that's been at the core for me. And so I enjoy the topic, and anything around it is of importance to me and of interest. So, so where does all this start? I think it starts really at an early age. We have to figure out how to be successful in life, or how to survive, for that matter, depending upon our situations or how we look at it. And, so we figure out ways to do things. We figure out how to get things done. That's sort of what we are as human beings. We problem solve, and we understand what the right path is for ourselves. And so as we become successful at something, we've created a process or a pattern. And that pattern, becomes potentially a habit. If we start to become more and more successful, then we keep using that same path, that same behavior, that same habit, whatever it is that we've used to get us to success or to get us to survive. And so it becomes a repeatable thing. And over time, it becomes a default behavior, if you will. We've learned it so well that we don't even think about it. We just go right to it, and we do it, we get it done, and we succeed. And so, and I think the world looks at us as we become successful. Then we start to lead if we're successful, and people think, oh, well, they should be the leader then. And we all know how that goes. People in technical roles that turn into managers, they've developed this great technical sense and this intellect, and they're brilliant. But then you throw them into a role that they're supposed to manage people, and it feels very awkward. I don't know what to do. How do I relate? I don't know. But yet they're in this role, and they have to be successful. So, okay, I'll give it a try. Let me use the same tools and learning and habits that I had before in this role. And so sometimes we may be able to adopt and be successful and so forth. And other times we might fail. We might have to learn and do things differently. So, as we become leaders, if we haven't learned these things early, it can be a real challenge for us. But we can succeed for sure. But at some point, as things get busier and busier and more hectic, we might be hitting a cap, a ceiling, if you will. And there might be some developmental gaps that we have that we don't necessarily understand or know about. So we have to learn about those and figure those out. And along the way, in this process of being a leader in a company or whatever, running your own business like you do, Jason, and your partner, Damon, there are times when things get way more complex than what we thought they would or what we know how to deal with. And so I'm going to throw out a term here called VUCA. I think we may have talked about this in the past. It's coined from way back when the Berlin Wall fell in the late 80s. The U.S. government coined this term VUCA, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. As that is the state of the world, it's becoming more and more risky because of this event. And more recently, I was talking to my cousin's husband, and he said, Tim, you need to add to that VUCA statement. You need to add two things: interconnectedness and speed. And so we have VUCASE, I guess. French, I suppose. I'm not much of a French speaker, but so this idea of all these things going on, and it's happening so rapidly and very quickly. And we see it on the internet all the time. If there's a mistake that's made, wow, it's broadcast to millions in a matter of seconds. And that could be the demise of a company, certainly, or of an individual. We've seen that happen. So, you know, you put in leadership, you throw in VUCASE kind of perspectives, and wow, we got a potential for real trouble, real disaster for leadership. Our company might be on the brink of failing because our leaders can't grow and develop. They don't have the capacity or the knowledge or the self-awareness to know that they need to continue to grow and learn and stay ahead of the curve. Certainly give most businesses and companies a vast amount of credit that they're smart people and they figure out, hey, we got a problem, and they learn to solve it. But, you know, there are a lot of big companies that haven't figured that out. And in fact, I think we got a slide. If you could pull that slide up, let's just talk through some of those things. And, you know, I think everybody recognizes most of these companies, you know, some behemoth companies, as you look at it, that have failed. Kodak and Pan Am and Sony and Decca Records, you know. So Kodak had developed digital photography in 1978, and they shelved it. Thought not a good idea. You know, we got this great thing going on. Let's not bring this about. And I think, in fact, they sold it to somebody, and you know, and then obviously it's taken off, and Kodak went out of business.
Right.
So they weren't able to adjust to the changing times, and they didn't have the foresight to move forward. And so the leadership, as I've read about Kodak, the leadership was really stuck in what they had and the status quo of what was going on. You know,
and then it's too late, right?
Yeah, and then it's too late.
Right, because the R&D ramp up period is so long that it's too hard to compete with the people who are already into it.
Yep. Yeah, and if you've sold the invention to somebody else, I mean, then you're sort of lost. But
right, exactly. It's interesting on that slide that it says that Kodak developed digital photography. How ironic,
isn't it?
They developed film and they developed digital photography. Interesting.
Yeah. And so it goes. I mean, number 7, Decca Records failed to sign the Beatles because the guitar groups are on the way out. Wow. 1962. No future in the business for the Beatles.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, they missed it. Not open, not on top of what's going on, not learning, and not available to the new things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great slide, and I think what it shows is that you can have foresight, but that foresight isn't always right. You know, what it also shows is that my guess would be that leadership at some of these companies were probably not listening to the people below them to allow those people to become leaders and move the ball forward, if you will. Something that you said earlier I wanted to comment on, and that is that, you know, let's say that you're technically a great engineer and you become CEO of a company, and to your point, you're having to learn how to become the CEO versus learning how to do everything you've been trained to do from day one in your in your profession. Well, if you're learning, it's very hard to teach someone else, right? Because you can't do both things at the same time, because you're making your own mistakes and you don't want to perpetuate those mistakes that you're mentoring or leading other people. So one of those things that I was thinking about is, if we are leaders in companies and we're learning how to manage people, we're learning how to give direction, we're learning how to sculpt the way that our businesses are going, hiring a coach, hiring a management consultant, hiring great people in HR to make sure that the people that are being put in these positions have a level of expertise already of what your company needs, is so critical, I think, if you are in a learning position. If you're already a seasoned manager of people and you know how to train and mentor and do all those things, maybe you don't need that as much when it comes to the scalability, but you certainly do if you're newly crowned or starting your own business and you're finding that managing the business and managing the people within the business is difficult.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the other point though too, to sort of toot my own horn, I guess, LeBron James has his own coach. Serena Williams has her own coach. Some of the greatest out there, they all have their own coaches.
Right.
If you want to be great at something, hire a coach. I mean, having that other perspective that you don't see, or to help you see the things that you can't, and to provide feedback and so forth, is so valuable. It's so important for us to have an environment of constant feedback where we're growing and learning and constantly on the move. There's a phrase out there that you learn more as a teacher than the students do. And many times that is the case, because if we have to teach it, then we really have to know it.
Right.
And so that is a perspective I think that's valuable to think about as well. But point well taken from you, Jason. I think, there are some things that we're new at, that we don't quite get, that we definitely have to have some input and support around us of people that we trust and can trust, that will help to uplift and strengthen and teach us. We all need that for sure.
Absolutely. You have a coach.
Oh yes, I do.
Right. When the executive leadership coach has their own executive leadership coach, you know that there's a value there because you value it as much as what you're providing to other people. And I think that to me, that speaks volumes about who you are as a person, and the type of professional that you want to be. You always see that there's room for growth and learning. And so I think that says that story. So absolutely. Agreed.
Yeah, no doubt about that. There's always more we can learn in different ways, and different perspectives that are brought forward by our coaches. And it's so valuable. Absolutely.
Yep. So let's talk about that gap or the ceiling. Let's go a little deeper into that, because that's fascinating.
Yeah, agreed. Yes. So, so this gap is what kind of gap is it? It's a gap between our knowledge of where we are and where we need to be. It could be a gap of our awareness. I am not aware of the impact of the things that I'm doing. Other people have a view of how I am behaving. I don't share that same view. Those are all different kinds of gaps that we need to become aware of as leaders. And sometimes those developmental gaps are big and can really be a challenge to get through. So how do we determine that? How do we understand that? Well, certainly one thing is to get input, feedback from other people. We have to do our research and develop research, and then develop the things that we need to. Research might be industry research, find out where our competition is versus us. Maybe there's ideas out there that need to be brought forward and we're not aware of those. All those kinds of things are different gaps that we might not be aware of, and that we would need to close those gaps. And so where do we determine those gaps, and what are those sort of the, where do those gaps come from, I guess is probably the right way to phrase it. So my thought is that we create our own gaps. We talked already about strengths, and we develop these, let's just take technical, sort of the mind intellect strength. We develop that over time, and that's what gets us to be the great developers that we are, the great builders that we are, the great technical analysts, whatever those things are. So we develop this, but we may not have developed some of our other areas, like maybe our emotional strengths or our physical strengths or whatever. But nonetheless, we have this super strength. And so this super strength has certain qualities about it. And those qualities are fantastic. It's what gets us to where we are. It's what we succeed with. And so why don't we look at this? I think we've got another slide here. Look at the next slide in the deck. Yeah, so this is sort of the idea, this mental mind, the idea-oriented, the intellect. We've developed a strength, and on the left side of the chart here is the strengths are intellectually brilliant, idea generator, seeks knowledge and truth, is quite rational. Well, on the other side of the equation, the gap, if you will, are the liabilities that sort of come along sometimes with these strengths. When these strengths are in overdrive, when they are sort of overused. So intellectually brilliant, but comes across as being very critical, is an idea generator, but finds fault with others, seeks knowledge and truth, but works in a protecting way of being, sort of, is rational, but controls how the work gets done. So these are the liabilities that might come along with these things, and that can create a problem. So my fears in this, if I'm a mental mind, idea-oriented, intellectual kind of person, and that's my super strength, my self-worth and security depends upon others seeing me as the smartest guy in the room, that I'm superior. And I fear being irrelevant. I fear vulnerability. I don't want people on the inside to know. So I sort of hold back in some ways. Let's look at the next slide. And so then what happens? These super strengths, when they go into a reactive kind of way, they're canceled out by our liabilities. So these negative things, and can you imagine somebody saying, well, Jeff is so smart, but he is so stinking critical. Or George, he has amazing ideas, but wow, he controls everything that we do. So it's a yes, it's great, but, and we really want it to be yes and. We don't want these liabilities to cancel out our strengths. And so many times that's what happens. And that creates this gap, that creates the ceiling for us. And we have a hard time getting out of it because these strengths are so strong and we've relied on them so much that, we just can't get away from them. And that becomes a challenge.
Right. So Tim, how do we scale the leadership then? Like what are some of the ways to sort of get into that execution of how do you do that then? Obviously there's a lot of minefields out there. And there's a lot of missteps we can take. So what are your sort of top tier things that you think, okay, these would be the places where I would start?
Yeah. So it's a great question. And I think that's sort of the business that I'm about. And I've relied pretty heavily on the Leadership Circle group. They have a tool called the Leadership Circle Profile, which is a 360 assessment tool. And the folks that developed it, Bill Adams and Bob Anderson, just amazing guys. And they've come up with a lot of these ideas that we're sharing today and the things and the path that sort of will go on here. But, they have some great ideas and thought processes around how we move forward and move away from these gaps or close these gaps. So first off, we got to figure ourselves out. Back to your point, we've got to learn. We've got to understand it. So it begins with us, and that starts with feedback. We work on ourselves. We figure ourselves out. We figure out what the right direction is and so forth. So that's number one. Once we sort of get that path going and we've developed our pathway, our agenda for growth, then we look to our leadership team. We look to our leaders, and we own this developmental agenda. It's something that becomes part of our process. It's part of the way we work. We're all working to be better. So if I, as a leader, raise myself up and I get my leadership to raise themselves up, just think of all the space then that's created for the rest of the company underneath them to grow and to learn. So that's the idea of scalability. So we're bringing other people up as we move up. And this concept then, as we develop our leaders and we find out we get the right people in the right place, doing the right things, we have them work on their leadership concepts and growth that they need to have. Everybody's evaluated for their effectiveness as leaders, both as individuals and as a group. And then from there, we look at the whole company. How do we develop the entire company in the process? What are the areas that we can create and offer to them so that they have an opportunity to develop as well? And so I think that's sort of the idea, and it's a focus on leading through development. And as we strengthen our people, the people are what make our company go round. And as you know, we're not just developing one person, but we're developing one times whatever the number is within the company, and we lift the whole company. And what is it? What's the phrase? Rising tide raises all boats.
Right.
That's sort of the concept. And and from there, I mean, you can't ask for a better situation to be in as an employee than to have your leaders wanting to help develop you. Wow, that's great.
Or to lead by example, for that matter. Yeah. Because sometimes people just learn by watching and listening and emulating and doing all the things that you're supposed to do. When you feel good as an employee that you're being led in the right direction, you're sponging that in and you're taking it in as well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And the thing about this is this is not for the timid of heart. This is hard work. To change our behaviors is super hard to do. But with focus, with help from outside perspectives, a coach, feedback, your staff, holding each other accountable, change happens. And positive change happens, and it changes companies. It changes people's lives. Loyalty changes, trust changes simply by focusing on this. And but it is hard work, and it takes effort and time. But it is all worth. It's worth everything that you put into it, for sure. Yeah, I'd love to hear your perspective on how it's affected your company, Jason.
Well, it's funny, as you're going through this, we started the process with you 2.5 years ago, honestly. And we really only started working through, once we got all the assessments back and we did everything, it's really been about a 2-year process. And I think what we have seen is we've been able to lead by example, embrace the things that we're really good at, improve the things where we had weaknesses, because we were able to get that leadership circle profile and get that 360 assessment, which we've gone through. If you haven't seen, that was a great podcast that we did a while back that, I mean, you could basically see where my deficiencies were and where my strengths were. But I do feel like, we had very recently, we had an annual meeting planning for 2020. And I did feel like the people in the room that were in the leadership roles as we move forward, that they have stepped up, and the logical path beyond that was to build the leadership systems to continue to help build the leadership as time goes on. So what happened was, it was a natural path from become better leaders, help mentor and create additional leaders in the company, and recognize the people who could be leaders. And now we're in a mode of, how do we set that up formally and as a system to follow the process and to continue to build that growth out to where the leadership of the company, the top level leadership, doesn't have to be as involved.
Yeah.
You can stay focused on the growth of your company. You can stay focused on the strategic areas that you need to be, where you're not having to constantly mentor because you've mentored and taught. Now those people are taking the reins and doing the same thing. So
As
I think,
you mentioned in our meeting, you talked directly about that, how it wasn't necessarily just you and Damon anymore.
right.
The others have taken the responsibility by example and by your suggestion, and you pulling them, prodding, asking, mentoring, developing, all those things. And here they are, they're taking it.
Yeah. And honestly, you have to swallow this a little bit, but sometimes there are people that are better at different areas than the ownership of the company. Some of the people that are now taking some of those leadership responsibilities in our company are much better at doing specific things than we are.
Yeah.
Because we come from different backgrounds, we've had different schooling, we're trained different ways. I mean, there's a lot of different things, and just your innate personality makes things different in people. Some people like spreadsheets. I particularly don't. Some people like to, map out a process. I do like to do that. But some people might just be really good at it. And some people may be better at having a conversation about something somebody's going through, or be able to relate more so to someone else.
Yeah. Or running meetings
or running. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of different things.
Yeah.
But I would say, you helped us recognize that from the beginning. And I think we were very lucky. This wasn't our first rodeo as being leaders, but what you were able to do is to really sculpt what this particular company needed versus just a general good leader. And I think that's a value that you provide that maybe a lot of other companies don't. So you always say start with self, right? I mean, that's your thing. Yeah. You have to start with who you are. Yeah. So what are a few things that might be helpful for somebody to get that kicked in as we close this podcast out? Can you sort of get people started down that road?
Yeah. So I think, obviously hire me, but after that, then seriously, I think, one of the things is you got to get feedback. If you understand where you're at, great. If not, then get feedback. Following that, you got to be truthful with yourself. Sometimes looking in the mirror is not always so easy to do.
Right.
When you get that feedback, you just have to accept it and be open to it. And then you have to be authentic and genuine. What is it I really want to get out of this? Okay, if I understand where I'm at, what do I want to do with it? What am I going to do with this information now that I have it? And once you have it, then all right, figure out what your pathway is. What am I going to let go of? What am I going to move to? And then go and practice and learn and practice and learn and hard work, rinse and repeat, wash, rinse and repeat. I mean, that's the whole thing. You just have to keep after it. As I think about this, we have to be patient with ourselves as well, because changing a pattern we've been working on for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, whatever it is, it's going to take some time. It's not going to happen overnight. So it's going to be ugly. It's going to be messy. There'll be challenges. There'll be times where you have to go back to ground zero and start all over again. There'll be times when there's successes. Fantastic, great. And then, you regress a little bit or whatever, or your temper gets the best of you and you go down that path you don't want to go down. But you just have to keep pressing on it. And eventually we'll be able to develop new behaviors. And as we develop these new behaviors, we start seeing the light and seeing the growth and the positive things that are happening. It makes us feel good. And then we want to do more and more of that. And that happens. And so then, you keep after it. And, pretty soon you're in a different level. And maybe then it's time to start doing another, working on something additionally. But part of it is reflection. Continue to get feedback, reflect on where you're at, and move forward, and constantly lean into it, and lead forward. That's really where we have to continue to press. So that's sort of that's sort of the process, sort of how we work through it, and it's 30 or 1 minute explanation of how coaching goes, and it takes months and months to figure these things out and to work through them. So anyway, that's I think that's a very positive opportunity for folks when they think about the great benefits of scaling themselves, scaling their company, scaling their leadership, and the value that comes from that overall is I don't know that you can really quantify it. Right. Profits will go up, company will be better, but the impact that you have in people's lives, you can't quantify those things that happen. It's just fantastic. And that's why I'm in the business, because I love to be a part of people's growth and development, and seeing those lights just go on for them. And it's like, wow, this is so cool. I don't know if I've shared this with you before, but one of my clients had a light bulb moment. And
it wasn't me, right?
It wasn't you, no.
Okay.
But you have had some light bulb moments. Sure. But he came back to me after sort of going off and doing some work, and he said, "Tim, you've ruined my life."
That's what you want to hear.
Yeah. And I said, well, then I'm doing my job. Because he has this whole new perspective on how to do things, and he's never been in this place before, and he doesn't know how to behave. And it's so awkward for him. He said, this is so difficult. You've ruined everything. All right, let's go.
Well, that's one perspective, right? Yeah. Or maybe you've helped him. I'm gonna go on the positive side of that.
Yeah, well, actually, he was being sarcastic.
I'm sure.
But yeah, I mean, it's sort of a feeling like that sometimes, is that, wow, this is so hard.
Right.
This can be so difficult, but it is. But it's worth the effort for sure.
Absolutely.
So.
All right. Well, another very intense, good conversation. I think hopefully people are getting a lot out of these podcasts. We certainly enjoy doing them. Absolutely, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And we have plans on many more coming up through the end of this year, and then obviously into next year. Tim, do you want to talk about what's coming up for you? You've got a big event here coming up.
Yeah, in fact, the slides that we showed, if you want to pull one of those slides up, that would be great. One of those last two slides. So come October 21st and 22nd, I'm going to be out in California at the Cornet Global. You see in the upper left corner there, Cornet Global Summit. It's in Orange County in Anaheim, California, October 20th to the 22nd. I actually have two presentations. One's on the 21st and one's on the 22nd. And I stole a couple of slides from that, already developing the content. But yeah, so that's a huge conference. There's 2,500 people that'll be in attendance, and I'll be speaking about, business is personal, and it certainly is. And, how does leadership play into that? And so I'm looking forward to the opportunity to present and interact with folks out there. And I think I'm one of about 100 presenters in the 3-day conference.
Wow.
And So yeah, it's a pretty prestigious thing. I feel honored to be able to be there, and I think there'll be some people here from Charlotte going there with, or that'll be out there with me, and I hope to see them there and anybody else that's interested. So
fantastic, great.
Yeah.
Well, how can people contact you to talk about either that or to maybe discuss, bringing you on to give them some help?
That'd be great. So Tim at alccoaches.com is my email address. 704-995-3870 is my phone number. We also have a website, alccoaches.com. We have a YouTube channel, which you can get through the website. And yeah, we'd love to get feedback from you on this podcast and others. Understand what works and other ideas that you might have or ideas that you might like to hear about.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's another one in the can, Tim.
There you go, Jason. Thank you.
Have a great rest of the day. Look forward to talking to you on the next podcast.
Appreciate it. Sounds good.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.